Welcome to this tutorial about X-Camera 2.3. This tutorial is pretty much oriented around the new features that we've added in 2.3 and is part of a series of tutorials that cover the full range of all the features in X-Camera. So what I want to do is take you through some of the new features and changes that we've made between X-Camera 2.2.1 and X-Camera 2.3. One of the first ones is a feature we call AI Planes Perspective, and what this really allows you to do is take any of your external cameras on your plane and effectively apply them to any of the X-plane AI planes that are flying around. And it's really cool to be able to do something like this to kind of see what does the world look like, you know, from if you were looking at an AI plane as opposed to your own plane. So this is pretty much automatic. What we've done here is I've configured, if we can go in here and take a look at my AI aircraft, I have 5 AI aircraft that I've got configured. And we're sitting here at KLAS in X-Plane 11. This is the new Las Vegas airport that was included in the latest update to X-Plane 11. And the way this AI aircraft perspective works is it's really pretty simple. It simply takes your external cameras that you've got defined and applies them to the position of any of the AI planes that are out there. So let's take a simple look at it. I'm sitting in the default 737 right now. I'm going to go to the tail view that I've got set up, and here we're looking at the tail view of my own aircraft. Now, if there are AI planes configured and X-Camera detects that there's some available to look at, it'll basically put this button up here called AI Perspective on. And I'm going to turn that on. And now what we can do is we can start cycling through the various AI planes and take a look at it. So here's one of our AI planes. I think this is a Baron 58. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is my plane was a 737, so the cameras are quite a bit further away on a 737 than they would be on a smaller plane like this. So we've got these scale up and scale down buttons that you can press here if you wanted to kind of zoom in and look at that from that perspective. Now, any of your cameras will work. So we've got a tail view right now, but if I take a look at the left stabilizer, you can see that works perfectly fine for this plane. Right flaps, right wing. I'll go back to the tail, as well as any of your animations. Let's try this. Let's try this animation here for the pre-flight. And sure enough, it kind of works. We might want to scale this up a little bit, kind of come out a bit. But you can see that it works on any of the planes. I'm going to come out a little bit further here, and I'm going to go to the next plane. So here we're looking at an MD-80. And again, just to kind of show you that it works, if I go to the left stabilizer, right stabilizer, tail, we'll go to the next AI plane. Here's I think it's a Cirrus, okay, that's getting pushed away from the gate. It'll start taxiing pretty soon. And again, because the Cirrus is smaller than my 737, I can scale down here to take a look at it a little bit closer, or scale up, like that. Here's another 737 that's parked at the gate. What else do we have here? Here we have a flying C-172. And here's our Baron. It's actually taking off from from Las Vegas. And we can actually scale in here a little bit if we wanted to take a look at it a little closer. So that's kind of it. It's a cool little feature. It works with any of the X-plane AI planes. My hope is to get it working with world traffic planes. I got it kind of working, but I got to work with Greg, the developer of world traffic. There's a couple of things he needs to change to make that work a little bit better. But my hope is that ultimately we'll have it working for world traffic too. And to go back to your plane, all you have to do is come in and say AI perspective off, and we're back to our own plane. And you can, all these AI perspective on and off, there's actually commands that you can put keypad keys to toggle back and forth on, that type of thing. So let's see, what else do I want to show you? There's also a couple of new options that we've added. One of them is you can get to the settings panel right from here from your mini control panel if you wish. And one of the new ones that we've added is enable a transparent, enable a solid control panel. So if you remember in the past, the control panel was pretty much transparent, and I'll bring it up here to kind of show you what the solid one looks like. People complained that they found it just a little bit too hard to read these, so we've made it so optionally you can have this either be solid like this, or if I go back to settings and I shut that off and I bring up the control panel, it'll go back to being semi-transparent like it was before in the in past releases. The other thing we've added in settings is the ability to hide this favorites row here. So these favorites row are basically any of the cameras that you've got view IDs associated with. And some people were actually going in and associating view IDs with all their cameras. And when you do that, you kind of get them replicated. You get them replicated in the category view here, and you get them replicated here. So with this setting, you can actually shut this off if you don't want it. Just say disable disable, where is it here? Yep, hide favorites in mini control panel. And if you do that, you can see that that fourth row goes away. If I turn it back on again. And this was beneficial for those people who didn't want to see that duplicate there if they had a lot of view IDs assigned to things. So that is another feature that we've added. The other thing we've added is a hide yoke feature. Let me actually bring up a different plane here. Let's bring up a Cessna Skyhawk. Okay, and you can see right now that I've got the yoke is hidden in here. If I bring up the control panel, and actually it might make sense for me to make this solid, you can see it a little bit better. There's a feature here to basically force the yoke. So right now I've got force the yoke visibility. There's a data ref behind X-plane that controls this for most planes. Now, one of the things I want to tell you up front is not all planes honor this yoke visibility data ref. And the challenge I found with it is that the naming of that data ref is a little ambiguous. It's unclear as to whether it means hide the yoke if you set it to a 1, or does it mean make the yoke be visible if you set it to a 1. And you could see in various planes it behaves differently to it. So I've simply made this so that you either can force it to a 0, you could force it to a 1, or don't force it at all and just let it kind of be whatever X-plane wants it to be. We thought this was kind of beneficial, particularly in the cases if you've got cameras where you're trying to get like a close-up view of the switches. Sometimes the yoke can get in the way, and this was one way so that you could force it to either be on or off. But I wanted to give you fair warning up front. It's not consistent between all the planes, and some planes frankly don't even respond to it, but most of them do. So that's something that you can give a try to see if it's if it'll meet your needs. The other thing we've done is we've added a continuous orbit. Let me actually see if I can show that to you. Let's get the plane up in the air, and I think we'll do is we'll just change this location. Customize it. I think what we'll do is we'll put it to a 10 nautical mile approach. And I'm just going to pause the sim so that I don't have to try to fly this plane, when I'm doing it. But if I come in here, bring up the control panel, and I say create orbit, a new feature we've got here is a continuous orbit. Now, it won't actually orbit forever. It'll do, I think it's roughly about 50 or 60 times, but you'll get bored before you give up on it. In the past, the way this orbit would work is there was no option here to do this. It would orbit the plane once, stop, and you'd have to start the camera again. Here, if I go ahead and I say put on a continuous orbit, and I create that orbit, it should give us now a orbit category. And if I'm not mistaken, this will just continue to go around and around. I say roughly about 50 or 60 times. It depends a little bit upon how many segments are in the orbit. If you actually create these things manually, and you put a lot more cameras in there, a lot more transitions in there, it might not go that many. If you have less transitions, you could make it go longer. But this was a feature that people had been asking for, is the ability to have a continuous orbit. And if we were to go back and we were to create that orbit again, I'll use the same name and I'll just shut this off and say create. Now the way it works is it'll basically just go once, if I did this correctly. Should go all the way around the plane. And then stop, like it just did there. Let's see, a couple of other features that we've added. One of them is an integration with XP Realistic. I know a number of you have got this already and you've been working with the beta version of XCamera 2.3. But XP Realistic it's similar to Headshake, but with a lot more features. It has the ability to shake the camera. It can also do things like give you head anticipation, that if you're starting to turn to the left, naturally your head would want to kind of look to the left. So it does a lot of cool things. It's also got a lot of sound additions that it does. So with XP Realistic, if you have that capability, by checking this box, it allows XP Realistic camera input to be applied to the particular camera that you've got. And I said again, it's very similar to Headshake. The other thing we have is a integration with SimHat, and this is kind of a general integration that we've added, where there are now data refs in XCamera that will allow you to apply head tracking input into XCamera. Up until now, we only supported track IR. Now with this, SimHat's the first one to take advantage of this. It's basically a head tracking capability that uses a spare iPhone you might have that you can strap to a cat. And as you look around, it'll actually move camera input. There's a reference to YouTube video in the documentation XCamera if you want to go take a look at how SimHat works. But if you are using SimHat, you enable track IR input just like you would track IR to bring that extra head tracking capabilities in. So let's see, we've shown you AI planes, various new options that we've got, and I also want to show you a number of other features, that are things like being able to control the camera with the joystick. So what I'd like to show you now is a new feature that we've added to XCamera 2.3, which is all about using a spare joystick and controller to effectively move the camera around. And there's a number of different uses for this. One of them, which I'm going to show you, is potentially using it to move a inspection camera around the aircraft to check it out prior to as a sort of a pre-flight inspection. Another use of it could be to just fly a free camera around an airport or scenery to explore a town or gates or those types of things, particularly in case if you just sort of want to look at the scenery, or maybe you're making a movie or something like that. So the first thing we want to do when we set this up is we have to map the joystick controller to a certain set of axes within X-Plane, which are called the camera axes. So I'll show you how to do that. You come up here to your settings, and what we're going to do is go to the joystick settings, and here you can see my T-Flight HOTAS X, which is what I'm using for a controller. And what I've done is, let's take a look at it here. You could see for the, let me just get the view up here to the front. What I've done is I've moved the, taken the stick here, which is this animal right here. You can see in the picture-in-a-picture video. I've moved that to camera left-right. The forward and back motion of the stick is set to camera zoom, which in XCamera, it's not going to really zoom the camera. It's going to move the camera forward and backwards. I've got the twist stick set to camera heading, which is kind of like looking at it left and right. And I've got the throttle moved to camera up and down. Okay. So that's the first thing you want to do is get all your axes assigned to these camera movements and view movements, because that's what X camera is going to look at if you enable it within the camera. The next thing you want to do is set the camera up to take advantage of these inputs. Now what I've done here is I've created a category called inspection, and in this category I've got one camera in here, which will bring up the control panel and take a look at it. And what you're going to want to do is enable the enable camera axis input. And when X camera sees this option on for the camera, it'll look at those axes and use it to effectively move the camera around. Now I've also done a couple of other things here. I've enabled track camera heading and track camera pitch. With these enabled, the camera heading and pitch is always going to automatically be adjusted to look at the center of gravity of the plane. So effectively, and you'll see this in the video, as I move the this left and right, effectively what's going to happen is every time I move the camera, the pitch changes, or the heading changes on the camera to always point towards the center of the plane, which thereby changes the orientation for the next left-right movement. So you'll effectively get almost like a rotating around the plane kind of an effect. If you shut these off, you can then basically aim the camera entirely by yourself using the twist stick or whatever you map the camera heading and pitch controller joysticks to, and that way you can steer the camera completely on your own. I'm going to show you here in my case, because I think generally in an external inspection you might be perfectly okay with the camera kind of always aiming towards the center of the aircraft. Okay, so without this check mark enabled, this enable camera axis input, X camera is going to ignore any activity within those. So let me just show you that now. If I move this left and right, you could see how the camera tends to want to rotate around. If I push this forward, it'll go back and up, and if I pull this back, the camera should go up and down like this. And if I shut this off, nothing happens when I move these joystick settings. So let me give you an example of how this could be used. Okay, so in my case, I'm going to just start my inspection. I'm going to start here. Maybe I'll go in a little bit, start to rotate around, back out a little bit. Yeah, maybe I'll bring the camera down a touch. Move it in. Maybe back up and back out. Back down again. So you can kind of get a sense of how this works. And I could go way in if I wish. For the push the stick. The other thing you get too, is I want to show you, is the amount of movement you get is entirely governed by what you've got this movement increment set to, whether it's small, medium, or large. As an example, if I were to bump this up to large, and just close this real quick, what you're going to see is the movement's really pretty significant, right? So I can get way out from the plane, go way up in the air, that type of thing. So example, if you're trying to fly around scenery, you might actually want to have this set to large, or maybe even very large. If you're trying to do an inspection on the plane, outside the plane, I think a medium is probably about what you're going to want to have, okay, for for that. So this kind of gives an example of the types of things that you can do with these camera axis inputs, and it's a lot of fun to play with. You can accomplish a lot of times the same thing with transitions and things of that nature, but this actually gives you a lot more control over the camera. You could do this obviously with your arrow keys and things of that nature, but with the joystick controllers you get a lot more fine control over it, and your movements can be very, very smooth. So hopefully you have an opportunity to play with this feature in X Camera 2.3, and let us know what you think of it. What I'd like to show you now is another feature that we've added to X Camera 2.3, which is basically a quick look emulation. As many of you may be aware, the X-plane view system has this concept of quick looks, which are basically 10 views that you can assign to these numpad keys over here. In the past, X-Camera kind of ignored those. It had its own mechanism for assigning keys and joystick buttons to individual views. One of the advantages of X-Camera is it can do up to 25 of these so-called favorites. But a lot of users got confused by it. They kind of expected X-Camera to behave with these numpad keys or these 10 quick look keys. So with 2.3, we've actually made it so that X-Camera can respond to those quick look commands and have a behavior with regard to setting them that's identical to the way it works within X-Plane. We've also made it so that if you are new to X-Camera and the first time you try to build a camera file for a plane, if you have quick looks assigned to the plane, X-Camera can for the most part import them. It can't do all of the external cameras in X-Plane. Some of the external views are unique and we don't have a direct equivalent of an X-Camera, but pretty much all the internal views and a number of the external views can all be imported. And that's what I want to show you right now. So we have a Cessna 172 right now. I do not have a camera definition file for X-Camera for the 172, so X-Camera at the moment is disabled on this plane. And what I want to show you is that I've actually set up 3 quick looks. So on quick look number 1, which is effectively this one key here, you'll see that I've got a close-up of the 6-pack. On quick look 2, keypad 2, I've got sort of a view of the GPS and the radios. And 0, I've got set back okay to the pilot view. So those are the only quick looks I've got set up right now. So I'm going to make believe that we're just going to start using this plane for the very first time with X-Camera. So I'm going to come up to plugins, go to X-Camera and enable it. Now what X-Camera will do is it'll detect that it has actually found some quick look views for this plane. And it's asking me in this dialog, would I like to import them? And I'm going to say, okay, yes, I would like to import them. And it's gone ahead and it's done that. Now if we take a look down here, you could see that we've got 4 cameras. The pilot view camera is the very first one that X-Camera creates as soon as you enable it, and there's no camera file for the plane. It'll always create one, which is right at the, wherever the default pilot view position is for that particular plane. You can also see that it imported 3 additional ones, quick look 0, 1 and 2. Now, interestingly enough, my quick look 0 is the same as the pilot view for all intent purposes. If you switch back and forth between these two, you'll see that they don't look any different. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete the one, that X-Camera created because I really don't need it. So we'll bring up the control panel here, and I do want to show you kind of what's happening under the covers. If I go to quick look 0, you could see the way it did this is it assigned view ID number 1 to quick look 0. So it's still under the covers using the X-Camera view ID system, which you can have up to 25 of these favorite cameras, but it's tying them to the quick looks. And the numbers are off by 1. So quick look key 0 is actually view ID number 1. Quick look key 9 would be view ID 10 within here. So if we just rattle through these, you can see quick look 1's got a view ID 2, and then quick look 2 has got a view ID of 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this pilot view because we don't need it anymore, because my quick look 0 was effectively the equivalent. Depending on how you set your quick looks up, you might not have a key for the pilot view and you want to hang on to it. So I'm just going to delete this one. And now I've got these 3 quick looks left over, and now we want to rename them. So I'm just going to come in here and call this one a pilot view. The next one I'll call this a 6-pack maybe. And this one we'll call the GPS / radios. And we'll save them. And you can see that they all now show up down here, in the the MIDI control panel, right? So I can select any one of them, 6-pack, GPS, and now I have a camera file that's all set up with X camera, which mimics those quick look views. So what I'm going to do now is create a couple of more, okay, and show you how easy it is to assign these. What I really should do is create a brand new camera here, which I'm going to do is do an add. I'll call this switches. And I'll position the camera where I want it. That looks pretty good. And now let's say what I want to do is assign this okay to Quick Look 3. All I have to do is do a Control keypad 3, and it should save that. And you can actually see that it immediately started to show up down here. And if we go back to the control panel, you'll see what it did is it forced a view ID 4 in here. And I think it also automatically saves all the cameras for you too, but just in case I'll do another one. So it's as simple as that to come in here, you know, and assign any views, okay, to your quick look buttons if you want to do that. So I could do another one here. Maybe I want something of, you know, maybe looking out the pilot window. So I'll just come in here, control panel. I'll do an add. I'll call this left window. And what I'll do is I'll just rotate this a little bit. There we go, it's the rotate button. Save all. And I'll just do a control, let's see, I think 4 is next, right? And you can see that that got added. So now if I go to any of these quick looks, like 0 brings me to the pilot, 1 is my 6-pack, 2 is my GPS, 3 is a switch panel, and 4 is this left view. So that kind of gives you a rundown of how we've done this quick look emulation. The one thing I do want to show you is you do have the ability to shut this off if you don't want it. In settings, there's a disable quick look emulation. By default, it is not checked, which means the quick look will work. And when would you might possibly want to disable this? One example would be, let's say that you would like to actually have a mix of X-plane views and X-camera views. A common thing for this is maybe some of the specialized X-plane external views that we don't have an equivalent for with X-camera. So what you might want to do is assign these quick looks to those specialized X-plane views. And in this case, you know, you don't want to have it enabled, because what X-camera will do is it will look for to see if you've got a view ID assigned to that quick look button, and it will overwrite it. So this allows you to disable it if indeed you did want to do that, and have your quick looks associated purely with X-plane, you know, incompatible external views is one example of where you might want to do something like that. So that's the quick look emulation feature, and you know, hope that you enjoy using that. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully you have found this tutorial on the X Camera 2.3 features to be helpful. Looking forward to everybody using the new release, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email, ask us a question on the Stick and Rudder Studios website, or ask a question on xplain.org, which I monitor regularly. Okay, good for now, and hope you enjoy X Camera 2.3.